Hello and welcome to the magic of fishing. Today you join me for something a little bit special. I'm on the legendary Royalty fishery on the Hampshire Avon, one of the world's most famous chalk streams, and it is glorious. I've booked the top weir compound for 2 days of fishing, and behind me you can see the Great Weir, which is right at the top of the Royalty. It's only the second time I've fished this majestic stretch of river, the first time being my very memorable day with my mate Andy on the bridge pool, which remains one of my favourite, and I'm sure one of your favourite videos on the magic of fishing since I launched this channel about 2 years ago. Some really special fish caught that day, including a new PB perch, some sea trout, a salmon, all kinds of fish. And I'm expecting things to be a little bit more tricky over the next 2 days because it has been sweltering in the UK for the last week. And that leads me to a little story about why I'm here. I owe this trip to one of my viewers, John Gray, up in Lincolnshire, not that far from my native Sheffield. And back in the winter, when I just uploaded a film of me fishing a lovely Surrey river, he got in touch and left me a really moving comment saying that he'd suffered a serious brain injury and was unable to travel far for fishing these days, and that he was getting to experience some of the UK's most beautiful fisheries through my channel. And he said one of his biggest dreams had been to catch a salmon on trotted shrimp from the Hampshire Avon. So we got chatting in the comments, and I realised I'd never caught a salmon despite being 52 years old and having fished since I was about 4 years old, thanks to my late dear granddad. And I started to look into it. I've got some contacts in this area thanks to my previous meetings with Nigel at Davis Tackle in Christchurch. That's where I'm staying, Christchurch. It's a lovely town, part of Bournemouth on the south coast, and sadly I drove past the now shut Davis Tackle because Nigel and his wife have retired just this year. You may have seen one of my videos capturing some of Nigel's stories before he packed up, and I'll put a link to that video in the description below if you're interested. But it was fantastic to see Nigel and his friend Tony Timms, another well-known figure on the Royalty. When I arrived earlier this weekend, I actually take a look round the Royalty Museum with Tony, and I'll show you a bit of that later in this video. Absolutely fascinating place and a fascinating chat with Tony. So much history to this fishery. It's been going for millennia, not just centuries, millennia. And I'm honoured to be fishing this weir compound all to myself for the next 2 days. It's not a cheap way to fish, but I said this summer would be about bringing you folks at home some special experiences, or me having some special experiences and sharing them with you. And going back to the story of John Gray, that's why I booked this pool, this fantastic looking pool, and the river downstream, because I was told by Nigel and Tony that it would give me a good chance of, at least a chance of catching a salmon on trotted shrimp or prawn. So I'd got all my gear. The bait had come over from Ireland thanks to Purple Whiskers, and I'd got a permit for the week to fish for salmon. But unfortunately, or rather fortunately for the fish and us anglers, the welfare of these fish comes first, and there's a sensible rule on this fishery that if the water temperature is above 19 degrees in the morning on this pool, there is no salmon fishing. And it's safe to say it's been 20 plus all week and getting warmer all the time, so I knew salmon fishing wouldn't be a possibility. I'm really sorry, John, but hey, I'm still here and I'm still going to be having a good go at the chub, barbel, perch, sea trout, who knows, anything that bites is welcome on the magic of fishing. So there won't be any salmon this time. I do hope to come back and do that in the future, but there will be 2 blissful days of fishing on this stunning pool, all on my own, except for you, of course. And I've been doing some baiting up, setting up several rods, so I've got float fishing options, I've got feeder options, link ledger and free lining options. I just want to be free to wander this pool and the river downstream and fish it how I want for the next 2 days, and that's what I intend to do. So now I've done that and put in a bit of bait. I've been using a bait dropper to get a bit of pellet and hemp in a few likely looking spots. I fancy kicking off on the float. And to begin, I've picked the noisiest swim of all, right next to the weir, but we're fishing a weir pool, so that feels appropriate to me. I love a bit of float fishing. I did actually do a little bit, just a couple of hours on the main royalty fishery yesterday afternoon, just to get my eye in. And I was excited to fish the famous pipe swim. And I caught a lot of fish, but not very big fish. They were very small chub, lots of bleak, dace, minnows. And that's because I was fishing with maggots. That's all I had with me. We're straight in here, first cast down. Another small fish, but a royalty fish. Oh, that's lovely, a little roach. What a start, happy with that. But yesterday, as I was saying, with the maggots, I couldn't get through the small stuff. There were sea trout jumping right next to me as I was wading in the water. And it was a lovely spot to fish, really enjoyable. But I could not get through the small fish. So although I'm feeding maggots today, and that's advice I've been given by not only Tony, but the very helpful river keeper here, Dan, who's been very helpful with the build up to this trip, whether I was going to be able to fish for salmon or not. You know, these small fish were a problem with maggots, so today I bought some pellet, meat, some small worms, and I'm going to start on the maggot and feed the maggot as I was advised. But if I'm getting too many really small fish, minnows and other tiddlers, I've got options to go on to bigger baits. And of course I've got the option to fish feeder, which is another method I've been recommended on this pool. Chucking in a feeder down towards the tail end of the white water. But I'm just going to start off on the stick to see whether I can get the fish going on the float. But it's one of those days where you just feel glad to be alive. You're given a gate code, a padlock code, when you make your booking online and get your ticket through. And much like hiring the punt on the bridge pool, there's no need to worry about whether any swims are going to be free or not, and there's even a fisherman's cabin or hut where you can create a base for yourself and leave some of your tackle that you're not using. And yeah, it just feels magic to be here. And we will see, the bait's gone there, we will see whether the fishing lives up to it, but it's one of those places where I wouldn't say the fishing's secondary, but You don't have to be catching all the time to be enjoying a big smile on your face and just feeling completely relaxed. Baited up a few spots further down as well where there's some deep holes. I've been told there might be some barbel or chub. But I think one of the magic things about fishing such wild, rugged pools as the Great Weir is you've no idea what might pull the float on the next. Could be anything from a minnow to a huge sea trout. Right down the tail end of the swim, this one. The net is overkill for this fish, but I don't care. It's a nice little chub. Lovely little chublet in the first 10 minutes. Happy. That's a little barbel. And that is a beautiful baby barbel. Fantastic to see for the future of the fishery. I've just been talking to Dan, the river keeper, lovely, lovely chap, and he was telling me a few little barbel have been coming out. Let's get him back. Well, believe you me, I did not need any more winding up in terms of my excitement levels, but to have had a little roach, a chub and a barbel in the first 15 minutes, not only has that got me grinning ear from ear to ear, but I've also just had a visit from Dan, the royalty river keeper, and we were just swapping stories, but he was giving me some pointers about where I could try, how I should fish it. He said it has been fishing well this week despite the heat and the bright conditions, and we've got a bit of a southwesterly blowing today as well, so the pressure might be down a little bit and that might help things. But he's just got me over the edge with excitement. Here's another fish, because he's talked about the possibility of roach over on the far side, bream where I'm fishing now. Said some chub have come out up to 7 pounds. Wow, this is feisty little fish, this, weeding me up. Yeah, several 7-pound chub this week. Incredible stuff. And here's a baby version, another little chublet. But the fish seem to be responding to the maggot feed. He's told me it's worth baiting a spot or two with pellets, trying with bigger baits. Also worth trying a cast up to the sill of the weir with a big bait. And as you can imagine, my head is just buzzing with options and ideas, and all I can say is thank God I booked it for 2 days and I'm not panicking about trying to fit everything in one day. I really can afford to just enjoy myself and take it all in and try some of the fishing that I want to try. A bit of float fishing, a bit of feeder, different swims, and some straight lead fishing with bigger baits for big fish as well. He said none of the big barbel have been coming out so far this week, but plenty of smaller ones. And he said there are some huge sea trout coming through at the moment, as well as salmon. And he's already seen a salmon this morning further down the river. Another hard fighting weir fish, just about swingable. Lovely plump chublet and a bunch of maggots. Off he goes. Well, this is a great example of why it's a luxury, a lovely luxury to have a base camp, which is actually where I'm fishing now, but I've just been over to the other side to have a go on the float over there because I've been told there can be some good roach over there. But the sky's clouded over and there's a real blustery wind blowing straight across the pool into that bank, so float control was proving really tricky. Not only that, but feed was going everywhere, blown back into my face at times. And it's times like that when you should realise you don't have to persevere against the elements. Why not come back over to the other side of the pool where the wind's off my back and have a go on the tip, which I fancied doing as well. So I'm fishing a bit further down than where I was trotting the float not so long ago, with a big bunch of maggots on, and I'm going to keep that feeder going in regularly every 5 minutes. That's the first fish on the feeder. Not a big one, but you never know what it's going to be. Really enjoyable fishing. Oh, it's got some power. I think this is another chub. A touch bigger than the rest. Bit bigger than the previous chub. It's my kind of fishing, this. Right, we are back by the noisy weir pool. The bites just dried up a little bit on the tip with the maggot, and it didn't feel like keeping that feed going in was bringing the fish on the feed, and if anything the bites were quieting down. So I thought I'd have a break. Still fishing the tip, but a simple link ledger, couple of swan shot, short hook link, and some nice ragged chunks of luncheon meat. And I'll have a cast up by the weir into the white water and beyond into a shelf where I'm told the main current normally comes out and there might be a bit of a deep hole, and then I'll try bouncing it down river as well and see whether we can get anything on a bigger bait. I said you never know what you get in this pool. An eel on rolled meat. He's not small either. Here he comes. Wow, another sign of a healthy river. really don't know what's going to come next. Look at him. Wow. Unhooked himself, that's handy. In fact, I've met some really nice anglers since I've been here. A lovely bunch in Christchurch Angling Centre, which is one of the places you can get yourself a day ticket. Of course, you don't have to book one of the premier pools, like the Top Weir compound or the Parlour pool, where I hope to try this evening, or indeed the Bridge pool. You can get day tickets online, or as I say, from local tackle shops. £16 in high season, I think, which okay might be a bit more than your average commercial day ticket, but yeah, you're paying to fish the most famous fishery in the land, and it's famous for many reasons, not just the history, but the amazing fish that can be caught here. You know, Dan was talking about several £7 chub coming out in the first week, not to mention the game fish, the salmon runs and the sea trout, pike well into the 30s. It's a remarkable place. And yeah, I bumped into one or two lovely anglers like Dave, who I met when I came down to the museum to see Tony and Nigel, and he recognised me and was a fan of the channel. I actually bumped into him yesterday again, and he said that he'd had a 6+ chub out of Throop this week, and after a bit of description it turned out it was in the same swim where I managed to lose one on opening day. But good on Dave for getting a 6. That's what I was hoping and praying for that day, if you've seen that video in the last few weeks. But it's not ridiculously busy despite its fame and the history here. You know, yesterday went down to have a quick go on the pipe swim, and not only was that free, but the swims either side of it, there were probably 3 or 4 anglers enjoying the summer sunshine. So if you fancy a go at experiencing the royalty, don't be put off by thinking that you need to spend a fortune or that it's going to be ram-packed. Still early in the season, and there were loads of swims to choose from. In fact, talking of the fame and the deep, deep, complex history of the royalty, I reckon now's a good time to let you into the Aladdin's cave that is the Royalty Museum. And Tony Timms, who showed me around it, has spent years and years untangling that complex history. And as a result, he's got some awesome stories to tell. So let's step inside and hear a few of them. So Tony, thanks for having me. Do you still call it the Rod Room, or is it now the Royalty Museum?
Royalty Fishery Museum, yeah, but it's both. It's for years it was always the Rod Room, but yeah, some people use both terms. You know, it's.
And how long have you been running this?
I've been building this, researching it for just about 20 years this year.
Wow.
Funny enough that you're here, so it's about 20 years. So you start a project like this, it never ends. To be honest, it'll go on and on.
It's a life's passion, I can tell. I've only been here half an hour, but the enthusiasm is off the scale, and completely understandably. Yeah. So the one word that came to mind when I walked in was wow. Actually jaw dropping, just to see, I don't know, the history, the tackle, the fish. Yeah. The anglers, and we'll have a look at some of the stuff in here before long. But just explain why the royalty for you and your history with the fishery.
Yeah, well, I've my own personal history here is fishing since I was sort of 6 years old. So and now circumstances, I'd moved down in 1983, and I fished this, since a kid, and salmon fished it since 1976. But I love all fish, so that's where we are. A member of the syndicate here for many years. Don't fish so much now, but to be honest, I love the place even more. Really.
Yeah, I was really interested to learn that when we had a chat on the phone, and you said that you weren't fishing so much these days, but you took your pleasure from seeing others.
Yes, yeah, that's as equally enjoyable. You know, it really is. But it's it's a fascinating place, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning history. Just recently, I'm still finding stuff really that I thought I knew, and I didn't. And there's more to come, no doubt.
You've just been giving me a whirlwind tour before we go into a bit more detail.
Yeah.
But I mean, this has been a recognised fishery for millennia.
It has.
Explain how old this fishery is.
Well, the very first sort of reference to a royal fishery was 939, unbelievably, and that was King Athelstan, and it's a document that states that he's granted a weir on the River Avon at Christchurch. Incidentally, it's also the very first time Christchurch is actually mentioned. It was always known as Twynham up to that particular thing. But also, I have researched two earlier dates that I can't say is proven at the moment, but certainly one from him, and even an earlier one from his father, Edward. Yeah. So it might even go back further.
And I love that accuracy or commitment to the truth. It's, us anglers are known for exaggeration and tall tales, shall we say, from the riverbank. Yeah. But I can tell you've really done your research through a combination of, you say the local museum, online and other sources.
Yeah, all kinds of places, and you just learn the story. And I say, moving on from this king, it's always been held by the crown. We've got documents in this room talking about Henry VIII, and certainly a place, Wild Weir, not more than about 500 yards from here, but which still parts of it exist under the water. It's got some real history. And so when you work through, it's always been the crown. It's always been leased as well to other people, usually members of the royal court or aristocracy. And as time goes on, it comes into private hands. But all anglers that love the royalty fishery, the name actually royalty fishery is granted in the reign of Mary Tudor.
Okay.
It goes back that far. It's renewed by Elizabeth I in her reign, and it's been like that ever since. In the 60s, the West Hants Water Company were challenged for the name in the High Court, and they won, and hence it's always stayed the same. The evidence is all there for anybody to see if you know where to research it. You know? And all the flags and coats of arms you see in this room, I taught myself heraldry how to do it. All the shields are made, coat of arms are done by myself, and all the mottos, and it all represents the history over hundreds of years. And as I say, each one of these represents either the owner or the leasing the business, or the property, I should say, and eventually it comes down through the years to private hands. When some of these leases were done, certainly around the time of Henry VIII, and one particular lease is the lady concerned was Countess of Salisbury, and she was attainted of treason, and the document is in this room. Tragically, it was false as well. She lost her life at the Tower, and it was handed to the first Earl of Southampton, who then took over it. So, and that's not the only time it's happened. There's been several times when it's been leased from the Crown to private hands or aristocratic hands, I would say. And there's been acts of treason, or alleged, shall we say, treason. And they've lost their property, fishery, everything.
Maybe when it suited.
Yeah. And people say how, regarding the royalty fishery, it's very complex because it fits in. There's 3 manors in Christchurch, and this has been the trouble, is untangling the whole lot.
Yeah.
And eventually I discovered what one of them manors were. you know, and that's the way it's gone. It's just gone from there. Eventually, it comes handed down and purchased by Henry Rose. He was the treasurer of the Navy. It went to his son, and in Sir George Henry Rose, and then when he passed, it was then come up for sale, and in 1855, bought by a gentleman at auction, a guy called Tyrwhitt Walker, and paid £4,000 for it.
£4,000 for royalty.
Yeah, and he paid £400 documents in this room, which I perhaps...
400,
he
sorry.
paid £400 deposit. £400 deposit.
Okay, deposit.
And then the rest was 4,000. Okay. And that's a bit of the royalty. And the manor was sold in 4 lots. But the bit that me and you would love, and anglers would love, the royalty fishery, was lot 4. And that's the bit that is we all know.
And it's really unbroken history then, from 900 and something.
Yeah, all the way through. It's all documented. And I say it was sold eventually at the Dolphin Hotel in Southampton. I say the documents here, we perhaps have a look later.
I think when most people think of fishing history, they might think back as far as, I don't know, the Complete Angler, Isaac, etc. I mean, that for most people would be deep history, and you know, perhaps they might be thinking more of Victorian times or whatever. But this really does go back
long time. I mean, as I said
millennia.
Oh yeah, and as I was saying to you earlier, it was a commercial fishery as well. Before it was a sport fishery, and everything was sold.
So tell us, talking of commercial fisheries, tell us about where this museum is, what the building was originally made for, because that was fascinating when you and Nigel were telling me outside.
Yeah, so as you'll see, Frederick Tizard was a very famous keeper here. In actual fact, his family are all famous keepers. His son was the keeper at Winkton, and his brother Samuel was a keeper for Lord Normanton at Summerley. Okay. And so they all lived by the river, and they were all fishermen stroke keepers. Frederick Tizard in particular, I've got a connection with. He lived where I live at number 3 Avon Buildings. This building was put up around about 1886, and Tizard moved in here with his, I think he had 9, perhaps 10 children. And they all moved in here. I've got, we'll look at this, we've got photos of Tizard over there at the moment we can show you. But yeah, he moved here. This particular room, the house above is absolutely huge. This room is where the commercial catch used to come, hence the stone floors. There's a drainage point. In the old days, before I changed the windows around, there was an air vent behind me as well. And this is where all the fish were laid out for...
The salmon?
Salmon. Usually salmon, but everything. Sea trout, roach.
Really?
They loosed not just salmon. It was a known salmon fishery, but as I say, everything. Roach,
the fish that have been in this room. Then,
unbelievable.
I mean...
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Records presumably would have been brought here for
when we go on to the fish that were caught here on Rod and Line sport-wise, there's everything that was a record. A lot of them national records in actual fact, not just royalty Avon records, were all in this room. We can have a look later, the set of scales that were there, you know.
So it's a very fitting place to base the museum then.
Yeah, it is. Everybody sort of says that. Yeah, it was made to be, I think, really, you know, how it's ended up. And, you know, over that time, we've had everybody in this room. I mean, the likes of F.W.K. Wallace, as we showed you earlier, Richard Walker, the Bailey, you name them, they've been here. You know.
Some of your heroes.
Oh yeah, yeah. One of my, you know, certainly Jack Harrigan, Dave Stewart, Peter Wheat. You know, our cool friends. Jack isn't with us no more. So all these wonderful anglers over the time have all spent time in this room. It's and as you can see with the step you come in, it's well worn. Well
worn step. I like it. I mean, I stopped outside Davis Tackle. Just to check it really was closed and that Nigel really had retired, and of course it had closed and he is retired. It was wonderful to see him outside with a tan on his face and a smile on his face, and he said he's growing into retirement. You were joking about how your clock's gone all askew because you were so used to his routines and they've changed.
You could set literally the clock by him every day, and I've often said to my wife Michelle, what's Nigel doing going past at, you know, a Thursday morning at 10 o'clock? I said, well, you can do. And she's had to remind me several times, you know, because everything was a rhythm to Nigel.
And I know Nigel talked to me when I did that video with him before he, decided to shut up shop. A lot of people have watched that and enjoyed it and commented. But yeah, he talked about the famous anglers that had walked through that door and used the handle of that door over the years. And you've got a very similar situation here, but stretching back, certainly to Victorian times.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, which we can look at. I mean, we've got all the keepers here. I said before, John, although it's a fishery project, it's equally social history.
Yeah,
I'm as interested as the people that worked here as the fishing. You know, it's to sort of keep their memory alive. They were all fading into history. And it's nice, certainly, as I go back as far as we can go with photographs, but, from today of our present great, keeper, Dan, fantastic guy. Really
he's
good
been
keeper.
really helpful ahead of me fishing, giving me a couple of phone calls to help with advice and a few warnings that, the water level's very low, the water temperature's too hot for me to try. For salmon, unfortunately, this time. I was going to have my first ever attempt at prawning or shrimping for salmon, but he's been very helpful, as have you, and I know we're going to have a look around the fishery after this, which is fantastic. It'll only be my second time fishing the Royalty. The bridge pool was my first very memorable experience, and I've just been having a look outside, chatting to a couple of the local anglers who were both fans of the magic of fishing, which is nice.
Good.
But so should we start having a look at some of the fish? Because what would be a fishery without big fish and special fish? And there's certainly some here.
I can share some stories with you regarding some of the fish and some of the wonderful stories, actually, when I think about it, if I can come to mind. Fantastic.
Okay, great. So let's start with the biggest and arguably best of them all. This is the Hampshire Avon record salmon. Tell me a bit about this.
So this fish, John, was caught by a fantastic angler on the Royalty fishery, Granville Martin Howard. He had 6 over 40 pounds from here, unbelievably. That fish he had hooked in Greenbanks, and it was on a sprat. In them days, they fished the sprat before we used Devon minnows. He hooked the fish up there and played it, and he nearly lost the fish. It ran so hard, it nearly went. So anybody that knows Greenbanks on the Royalty fishery, that fish just bombed down through foxes, nearly lost it at the buttress of the railway bridge. They managed to fight it back up again, and Brian Parkinson, the keeper, managed to. I have to say gaff it, and that's what it was in them days. They fished with gaff out. They were all eaten. A remarkable catch. It's the biggest fish of all the chalk streams.
50 inches.
And the other thing that was interesting, it was a very quick growing fish. So a 1 year smolt and only 4 years in the sea. It grew to exceptional size.
And this is half a cast.
This is
half
only
the fish.
It's called a half cast, so you don't always get the full depth of the fish, but it gives you a good outline of what you would have expected.
I mean, just to put some perspective in, my hands are pretty big, and they're dwarfed by the head alone. So let's move on to this beautiful pair.
So these two fish are unique. It has to be unique. So Mr. Howard, as I say, he caught a lot of fish. In 1951, the fishing had just started coming back good again. And he hooked the bottom fish of these two, he hooked it in Hayter's Pool.
Which I might be fishing this weekend.
Yes, it's up in the weir and looking downstream on the east side of the river. A great fight. He really fought well. Mr. Howard had he was injured after the war, which I'll tell you about in a minute, but he had only one leg. And when that fish was being played, his leg come off in the mud in April. And the keeper said at the time, words to the effect, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Don't worry, bleep, 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 just get the fish out," which they done. And the fish weighed 41 pounds and 41 3/4 pounds. Cockfish, Hayter's Pool, on the 11th of April.
Wow.
The following week, he come back to fish again. And fishing the opposite pool, which was Edward's Pool on the east side of the river, he landed a fish of exactly the same weight.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you'll see it's a week apart. So
There's a real mean look on his face, this one.
Yeah. It'll probably never get done again, not fish of that size. They both...
A week apart.
They both measure exactly 48 inches.
They're full casts, these.
Even these, what they call them, John, is a 3/4 casts.
Okay, 3/4.
Yeah, 3/4. But unique double fish, you know. And the two photos in the middle of them are two more that he caught, over 40 pounds.
Now you get a sense of the scale.
Yep.
I mean, man-sized. A seated man-size,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah. So
this is the famous one-legged.
Yep. He had one leg. Now, there's an incredible story, really, regarding him. And he was in the First World War. He was in the thick of it. He was a translator.
Okay.
So he's in the Somme. He survived that without any injury whatsoever. But playing rugby in Civvy Street a little bit later on, the opposing side kicked the ball, shall we say, down a railway siding. He tried to go after it, slipped, fell on the track, lost one leg.
Way.
So it's
survived the Somme.
The carnage of that.
And then in a rugby incident.
Yeah.
A rugby and rail incident.
Yeah. And I've read his memoirs, and he used to suffer a bad back at the time, and he always said it was a good cure to hook these fish, these three big fish.
What a character!
He was a fantastic man.
What
fantastic
a character!
Man. And there is a link with this fishery, the royalty fishery, and the lower Itchen fishery at Southampton, Eastleigh, which is Gators Mill. It was Mr. Howard that set that fishery up, buying land and stretches of river to make it one continuous beat, which is still run today by his granddaughter.
Oh, fantastic.
Lindsay Farlow.
In the family.
In the family, yeah.
And just look at this, the top 10 heaviest recorded pike from the Hampshire Avon. But tell me about this one in particular, a real big girl.
Really good, beautiful fish. So it was caught here on the little stream. Most pike anglers know where it is. It's the Clockhouse Stream, the entrance to the Clockhouse Stream. I believe it was caught by the bypass bridge. It's a fantastic fish, 36 pounds.
36.
Yeah.
And how old's that?
Don't know how old that fish is. Don't know the actual age of the fish.
And that's an actual stuffed.
Yeah, that's the actual
taxidermied fish.
Yeah.
And look at this beautiful fella. Is it a boy?
Yes, yes.
Tell me about this young lad.
Not the prettiest, I know, but it's an important part of the room. That is the actual head, not a cast, the actual head of the River Frome record salmon. Oh. And caught on a gudgeon, and 1929. So yeah, it's an important part of the room.
Poor gudgeon, that was the last thing he saw. So back to a bit of history, and we really are talking history here. This is a copy of a document, a court document. Tell me about this, Tony.
So this was a document found by the water company. They had a phone call one day to the estates office. They found a big chest with documents in them, and amongst the gems were all the parliamentary rolls of Henry VIII and all the kings. And this beautiful document, this is Oliver Cromwell's document. It's a remarkable document. I didn't realise how important it was until a local JP friend of mine, not with us anymore, Ted Baker, translated it. And doing so, it tells you this was a court case against 21 armed poachers.
21?
Yeah. They attacked the fishery in, I think it was March 1657. And they stole 110 salmon, which was worth £110, which in 2010 was over £8,000 in current money.
Wow.
They went first of all to court to Southampton. 6 of them settled. 15 of them carried the case to the upper bench in Westminster. And this document tells you it was heard by Oliver Cromwell himself. It's
incredible.
It turns out to be a really important piece. And at the bottom there, they are the sworn in jury. They were all gents or esquires, shall we say.
Yeah.
And when he asked me, did I know what I got there? I said, we've got a beautiful document. It's got gold and black writing. It's squiggly. It looks pretty in the room. You know, that's how I originally took it. But it's turned out to be a really important piece. Historians have been crawling all over that since
Incredible,
it's been up.
incredible.
Yeah. And all the pools that we know today, Nat Mill is mentioned on there, the weirs, and you know, it's all there. Claypool, all the places, it's already there. All the boundaries, all the bush, the top of the fishery, it's all there to read. And at the bottom is an easy transcribe that you can actually read very easily.
So tell me about...
Yeah, so the first one, these are all coats of arms of aristocracy, or you know, the owners of the fishery, or in some cases, the one on the right, for instance, was a very fine angler, Gerard Winstanley Carlyon. He caught a tremendous amount of salmon here at the early part of the 20th century, biggest fish being over 46 pounds. Then we see, for instance, the Bishop of London. There's a photo of him in this room. Countess of Salisbury, as I was saying earlier, she owned the manor here and all the land, including the royalty. We come to Lord Bolingbroke.
Definitely seen a photo.
Yeah, he's one of the earliest salmon fishermen here. He was fishing here very early in the 1800s. And Lord Normington, who owns Summerley, he fished here a few times. I've got written evidence of him being here. We come to Sir Francis Sykes, very interesting man indeed. He tied a very famous fly, was named after him, the Sir Francis Sykes. You probably see the fly just below the motto.
Oh, yes.
Yep. He had an interest in the fishing here, but he also had a good interest in the netting for salmon at the harbour in the run at Muddyford. And as we move along, this particular gentleman was a fisherman here. He was a member of the angling clubs.
And there is
Cromwell's flag, yeah. Earl of Huntingdon was, he at some point he was involved here with the fishery. Duke of Burford, there's a photo of him in here as well. He was another member as well.
And to be clear, this is just a selection.
Oh yeah,
we've got these throughout.
It's just
Mary the First.
Yeah, Mary Tudor. Yep.
Henry VIII.
Yeah.
Elizabeth. I mean, the history goes on and on. So who owns the fishery today?
So, as I was saying earlier, John, the history continues, and so when it went into private hands, it fell eventually to the Mills family, John Mills, on the 12th of August, 1873. It was in his family until 1929. And that was his daughter. It was left to his only daughter, Miss Mary Frances Mills. The Mills family, a very important family of the valley. You know, they own this fishery. They still own the next fishery up at Winkton. And of course, they own Biston as well. So they're a very important family of the valley.
Okay.
So 1929, the West Hants Water Company purchased it. She wanted £20,000 for it. They offered £13,000 and they settled on £16,000. And the West Hants Water Company had already bought the parlour pool some years previously as well. And to be honest, it's since then, with mergers, incorporated, it's still owned even to this day by a water company, which is South West Water, based down in Exeter. Okay. And the fishery is managed nowadays by South West Lakes Trust. And as you agree, they've done a fantastic job.
Yeah, we'll have a look round later. Can we look at quickly some of the famous anglers who fished here, maybe starting from further back?
Yes, certainly.
So this is the Bolingbroke salmon fly again. I think I said I saw a photo earlier. I was obviously talking about a painting. Tell me about this gentleman.
He's a fascinating man. He was fishing here very early on, and certainly, you know, the early part of the 19th century, and he caught quite a few fish. I've actually got a record of him turning up here to fish his first day and catching 2 20-pounders in a short time. And one of the local families, the Reeks family at the time, they say, I think when I look at it, they was almost like gillies to him, because I've also uncovered another story where he gives them a lovely cup and signed by himself to them as well. And it's interesting, if you look, the colour of the Bolingbroke fly, which is a very famous Hampshire Avon salmon fly, almost imitates the colour of his jacket and his hair.
Good spot.
Yeah.
Now, moving on a bit in terms of the date, I see the name Richard Walker here.
Yeah.
And Tom Salis. What's going on here?
So this was a famous match arranged by Angling Times, and it pitted the greatest specimen hunter against the best match angler. And you can see him in this room here, using the scales, which are still here. And if you look,
the scales over in the corner.
Yeah. If you look very carefully, it's difficult to see in that picture, but the barbel, I think it was £10 plus at the time, I can't quite remember, is the fish that wins Walk of the Match. And yeah.
And that's the very weighing tray or scales.
The scales, yeah. They're well over 100 years old, bought by, in the time, purchased by Montague William Hayter, who was a very famous keeper here.
With the weights below.
Yeah.
And here, hiding behind, or partially hiding behind an old fisherman's rake, is a letter from and a signed picture from the late, great John Wilson. So really moving forward in time. There's a picture of him with some fantastic fish. Talk about some of the other anglers. Bill Quinnen, Andy Orme. And there's angling legend Peter Stone. Who else have we got? And I recognise Terry Lampard, big fish catcher extraordinaire. Dean Macy, much more recent times there with Ray Walton. A one-time barbel record holder?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, one of the best ever barbel anglers, I think most people would agree. He designed reels and rods. It's Bob Church. They're all there, aren't they?
They really are.
Yeah.
I think we've got, where's Chris Yates? There you go. A legendary fisherman and author, naturalist. One of my favourite authors. And there, I hope to meet him, perhaps in my stay, but there's the current riverkeeper with a stunning roach, Dan. And these are keepers here rather than just anglers, the people that have actually looked after the river.
What it is here, John, it's a mixture of keepers and people that lease the fishery, one or two leases as well, but it's mainly keepers, and they date from Dan, as we were saying, in a direct line back to 1754.
And I love this, it's not just famous anglers who are celebrated here, it is river keepers and owners and the fish.
Yeah, the idea is they were slowly, some of the old black and white photographs of people were slowly disappearing into history, and the idea of the project is that they're here now, they won't be forgotten.
Fantastic, and some real characters by the looks of it as well.
Yeah.
Real characters. They must have had a few tales to tell.
Yeah, and the next one just along, when you come to Ken Keynes there, he was a big part of my life. He was my tutor from a very early age. I first met him as a 6-year-old, and I wandered up onto in them early days, it was 30 shillings to fish upstream of this museum bridge, or the bridge that was originally there, and less at the bottom. And I ventured up, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "Excuse me, young man." He said, "You're not supposed to be up here. You'll have to come down to the bottom part," which he done. But he spent time with me.
Yeah.
And little did I know at that point, he impacted that on me throughout my life. And
incredible. You still remember the first meeting?
Yeah, very close friends with the family. And an amazing man. Absolutely amazing. Taught me my barbel fishing and he taught particularly my salmon fishing. I learnt so much from him. He had 2 fish himself to his own rod here, 42 and 45 pounds. Ridiculous.
I can't imagine. And what's this from Drennan?
This is when I first opened the room. This was a letter from Peter Drennan, and it was a very nice letter and a very unique picture. I think the story tells the picture and vice versa. It basically was, the photo was taken by Peter Stone,
Yeah.
And it shows you a young Peter Drennan,
Yeah.
rod bent. The gent to his left had been fishing there all day.
Yeah.
He was just about to go. They turned up, and I think while he was still there, he hadn't caught anything. As they were there, they landed several barbel just as he packed in, so I don't think he looked very pleased.
Love it. And there we've got Catching the Impossible crew. Bernard Cribbins, Hugh Miles, and of course the angler who caught some incredible fish in that series. I mean, mind-blowing fish. And here's another female angler. Tell me a bit about her.
So this is Kay Stewart, and those that know about her, read about her, she was without doubt the finest British female angler of all time, and wife to, of course, Dave Stewart. They were a fabulous team, and indeed Dave Stewart wrote a tremendous book as well called Minnows to Marlin, and they describe all their adventures in that book over their lifetimes.
It says here she caught 89 different species of fish.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's pretty good going.
Yeah, and that is a lovely sea trout there, caught in the parlour pool.
Where again I might be wetting a line this weekend.
Yep.
There's the husband.
Yep.
Dave Stewart.
1954.
That's a serious catch of
Yeah.
barbel and chub.
Yeah.
And of course, what do anglers need to catch fantastic fish from a legendary fishery? It's fishing tackle. And you've got plenty of that as well. Rods on the ceiling, there's a few on the wall here, along with some old scales and spring balances. Tell me about some of these rods.
So these rods again have been donated by individual anglers, and that's one thing I do actually, John. If people donate stuff, I always insist that their names and a tag goes on it, because at the end of the day they don't have to do it, but they kindly join in on the project.
And you're interested in anything that's connected with the fishery.
With the fishery, and it's so important that they donate it, and it's lovely. I mean, we've got lovely rods here. We've got Richard Walker Avon at the top here. We've got Hardy Avon as
with
well.
a Mitchell, is it?
Yeah, Mitchell's there. Beautiful. We all had one. I've still got two.
Have you now?
Yeah, I've still got two of them. And this is a Wallace, the great angler, Wallace Wizard.
A Wallace Wizard.
Yeah, totally unused. It's totally unused.
It looks brand new. The cork is unblemished.
Yeah, the gent that donated it, it was Nick who donated that. It is unblemished. It's never been used. The spigot covers are in another place in the museum. It's never been used.
Almost sad in a way, but I think if you've got one example of something that is as it was originally, that's nice as well. And look at that for an inscription on this split cane. What's this bottom?
So the importance of that rod is that it was donated by an angler. Again, unfortunately, isn't here anymore. But that rod actually belonged to the great Peter Stone.
Okay,
it's one of his own rods.
His hands have touched that cork handle. Incredible. And then some centre pins down here.
Some beautiful pins.
So lots of course gear here. Not all game, is it, by any means?
The coarse fishing tackle here is always it outnumbers game tackle. And as I was saying earlier, John, because I'm always conscious, because it's a mixed fishery, I'm conscious. So if I do a game bit, I'll do a coarse bit, and that's the way it is. I try and mix and match it as much as I possibly can. But when you've got 4 foot casts of big fish, they do take a bit of room. Yeah.
And tell me about this wicker creel. I think you told me a bit when I first came in. It's an amazing
it's
condition.
It's an amazing thing, because that is the actual Newark creel of the great F.W.K. Wallace. He had that. It was left to a gentleman called Claude Taylor, and Claude Taylor left it to the great angler friend of mine, Peter Wee, and from Peter it's found its way back home.
And this, I believe, is a picture of him actually using it on the Royal Sea.
That is the great man. Many years later, he went to come back to revisit the scene of his capture of his record barbel, British record barbel, and that's him sat actually on that creel. It's an amazing exhibit.
It's a little bit hairs going up moment. And my eye is drawn to this tall glass cabinet with all kinds of interesting items. Flies, reels, trophies. What have we got in here?
So some of the trophies there, in there, the 2 small cups here were donated. They were from the great angler Jack Davis. When he fished the Avon Championship, they entered the match and he won individual and his team won the team event as well.
Quite modest trophies, really.
Very modest, yeah. The bigger trophies, that was to do with a fishing match between the water companies at the time, and then the Environmental Agency and I think Bristol Water, I think it was at the time.
Oh, in 2000, fairly recently.
Yep.
And what about this?
That is one of the prizes also included in that match.
Okay.
That was donated by the ex-keeper here, and Andy Sloan.
Yeah.
And just below that, John, it's only a small exhibit, is the medal.
Oh, wow.
The medal is really historic.
You don't really see many fishing medals. I know they have them in the World Champs and things.
Well, that was kindly donated by Edward Upton when he broke the British barbel record. And
yes, you get them with record fish, don't you? Or used to.
Yep, and he very kindly donated it to the room a few years back.
That's lovely, and some old reels as well.
Yeah. That pipe, for instance, tells a story. They were doing an insect check, on the riverbed, and when Ken Keynes was here, and they found that pipe, and it was sent to experts, not people like me, sent to experts many years ago, and that is about 400 years old, and very rare because it's intact. As most people know, when you see a clay pipe, usually broken in half.
It's usually just the short bit.
Yeah.
Wow, so some angler most likely, or maybe an old keeper.
Yep, I like to think it might have been an old keeper.
Now, we've all seen the supposedly amusing greeting cards with the old man by a pond reeling in an old boot, but you actually have a real fishing boot story.
I do, John, yeah. So in 2008, Ray Walton, famous barbel angler, most anglers would know him, was sat up, I believe, up in Trammels at the time, and watching a little mole dig the earth up as it was coming up. That popped that little pipe, and
so not the boot. This is the pipe behind it. Yeah.
So it was being Ray. He bought it. Would you like it for the room? I never hardly had anything on display at that particular point, so I grabbed it and cased it.
Thanks to a mole and Ray.
Yeah, and a little bit later, there was a guy, Rob Stack. He was fishing in the Pallet Swing or Dick's Hole. It's within 200 yards of here, and he hooked, shall we say, and landed this shoe.
We'll call it a shoe then.
He brought it. When you look at it, it's an old keeper's boot, hobnailed.
Yeah.
And I will say, after that, his next capture was a barbel over 15 pound, which was his first ever barbel, by the way. But
what a day!
He kindly come. He donated it, and at that time, I was still researching the keepers at the time.
Yeah.
And eventually discovered a guy called Henry Joseph Preston, really important man.
He really looks like a character.
And lo and behold, we get the shoe, and it's absolutely identical.
It took my breath away when I saw it.
And the pipe, and we've had that looked at by experts on old clay pipes, not me. I wouldn't be experienced enough.
And this was in the 1800s or to the early 20th century.
Yeah, the pipe was found in 2008, but he was keeper here 1875, was it, to 1915.
And you said there's another photo of him over here.
There's several of him, but this is everybody's favourite, one of his favourite pictures. So anybody that knows the royalty, he sat at the entrance to the mill stream, looking back towards where we are now, John. It's a bit faded, but it's there. But very famous thing, and I'd like to think that rifle, that gun, is related to a story. It's quite famous in Christchurch. He lived in Beaconsfield Road, which is the road next to the royalty fishery, Avon Buildings. Every year, the children used to gather around where he would clear the chimney, and where he would put literally both barrels of the shotgun straight up the chimney. Health and safety today? I don't think so.
But just blow up the chimney.
His father was Henry Cave Preston, was the last town crier of Christchurch. Joseph Cave Preston.
Incredible, and there's another clay.
Yeah, that was just to give an idea. And the last photo of him, he was well known for being F.W.K. Wallace, the great angler. Here they are. He was his favourite gilly boatman, and there they both are in the Great Weir. And people might say, how can that be the Great Weir? Because I can't see Haters. If Haters isn't cleaned out in them days, and even to the point now, that was to grow over and become known as Swan Island. So behind them two is the entrance to Haters. Over to the left of the picture is Edward's Pool. The two fish, funny enough, right above is where they were caught from.
We'll finish where we started because I'm really eager to have a look at the fishery.
Yep.
If you'd be kind enough.
My pleasure, John.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We barely brushed the surface, such as that man's knowledge of the fascinating history of this fishery, going back to the 900s, as you heard. He spent years and years unravelling it all. It really is worth a visit if you decide to come and check out the Royalty for yourself. It's near the main car park, and it's not always open, but Tony lives locally, and if he hears of people interested in having a look round, he usually tries to make himself available like he did for me. Really worthwhile checking out. And welcome too to the legendary parlour pool. I'm privileged to be fishing here again on the Hampshire Avon, the Royalty fishery in Dorset. It's normally booked online exclusively for one or more anglers, but I've managed to get access as part of my weekend on the top weir compound. And because we know the water is so hot at the moment, or warm for this time of year, I'm targeting the really oxygenated water over on the far side. So I'm fishing from a lovely grassy bank and casting over to the nice foamy water just below where that's tumbling into the pool. And it's a bit of an all or nothing gambit for the final few hours of today before a whole new day opens up ahead of me tomorrow. I'm fishing meat on one rod, hoping for a barbel or chub. I'm going to keep putting in a maggot feeder a bit further down on the other rod and keep them both very close to me on bait runners so that nothing's going to get pulled in should I be lucky enough to get a take from a big fish. So let's keep everything crossed. Well, I've got a fish on the parlour pool. I don't want to get too excited because I don't think it's particularly big. I am being careful with it just in case. Don't know what it is yet. It might be a nice perch. Yay! Oh, I love a perch. Boyhood fish. Not quite as big as the perch I had from the bridge pool, but I'll take that. It's another species. Good morning and welcome back to the Royalty. After a few hours sleep for me, not too many, because I was late back from the parlour pool, an experience that I really enjoyed despite just catching the one perch. It really was memorable. And I'm now back on the Great Weir on another hot blue sky summer's day. It seems endless, this sunshine so far in June, and it's not making the fishing easy, but plenty of bites, plenty of variety, and really enjoyable fishing yesterday. I'm not going to do as much filming today because you've obviously now seen the spectacular beauty of this place, and I'd love to enjoy more fishing on my last day. I'm going to have to finish a bit early today, around 7ish, because I've got to get back home. It's an hour and a half back, unload the car, see Bunny, the new puppy, actually in my home rather than at the RSPCA, and of course try and get some more sleep before I'm back up for work tomorrow. So one more day in paradise and a shorter day than yesterday, but I will be sure to bring you any updates of fish that I'm catching. I fancy doing a bit more float fishing, just like I started with yesterday, and then perhaps go back over to the far bank and do some more feeder fishing, because one thing I didn't show you or explain yesterday is some of the vicious bites I managed to miss over there in the hour or so that I gave it. So I reckon it could be worth giving that another go. And then depending on what happens with that, I may end up going downstream back onto the main royalty stretch to a swim that's been recommended for the last couple of hours or so for a bit more float fishing if the swim's available. I've actually just had a nice conversation with a young chap from the Environment Agency. I got down here and was a bit worried that I'd left the gate unlocked, but I'd got a visitor and he was here to keep an eye on the water levels and the fish run, and we had a good chat about how, oh, that's a fish straight away. Only a small one, but very first put in. Just like yesterday. Ah, foul hooked. A dace. Shame it's foul hooked. That is another species. Oh, back he goes. So we've now managed dace, roach, perch, chub, barbel, and an eel, of course. And I did say to the EA guy that there's plenty of variety, but I also said I'd not seen any salmon or sea trout activity while I'd been on the pool. And a gudgeon. It's a complete aquarium, this place. Very similar to yesterday. Enjoying some nice action with some chublets. Plenty of bites. Lovely little chub. They really do scrap for the size. Again, I must say it's brilliant having a whole pool or even weir compound to yourself. You just fish where you want, fish how you like. And yeah, it takes a little bit of effort to move all the gear around, but I'm travelling pretty light and I've just come round to the far side where there's a lot of slower, deeper water that's come round the pool and is heading back up the far bank. And yeah, it's a bit breezy over here once again, but I did miss 2 or 3 proper bites. Don't know how. Yesterday evening, and I only managed to give it about an hour or so, so hopefully I'll give it a bit longer today. And I'm also going to try ground bait feeder. It's one method I've not tried up until now. I've got some marine halibut and hemp ground bait, a few micro pellets, and obviously plenty of maggots. And I'm going to cast regularly and just see whether I can stir up any activity in this steadier water, and with the ground bait going in, giving off plenty of scent, and try and fish in one spot rather than all over the pool when I was trotting. Well, couldn't manage much more than a few small dace on the feeder up at the Great Weir, so I said a fond farewell and packed my stuff and drove the short distance down to the Avon buildings. And below me you can see Home Pool, and this feels really fitting to be a last place to fish on this brilliant angling adventure. For starters, it's where I first arrived a couple of days ago and met Tony and Nigel and enjoyed a look round the museum, and indeed my first look round the royalty fishery. And Home Pool, what better place to fish before heading back home. It's really deep down by this steep wall, a good 10 or 12 foot it seems to be. I've not plumbed up, I've just been using the Olivette to work it out, and I've still not caught bottom at 10, 11 foot deep. So Seen some really interesting fish activity over on the gravel island in front of me as well. Quite a few fish swimming around there, small chub, and I think some mullet, a little shoal of mullet. Again, a reminder that we're really close to the sea here. So, got plenty of maggots left. Probably 3 hours to fish before I need to pack up. So, let's see what we can manage here. Wow, there's a big raft of weed going down. Well, I just hooked my first fish down there after 5 minutes. I think a small chub and a giant pike. Well, not a true giant, but giant when you see it come clean out the water after the fish on your hook. Pike came out for it. So that might mean fishing is a bit tricky down here for a while. Oh, we've got one. A nice little chublet. That is the theme of this trip. Lots and lots of little chub. Just not managed to find the better ones. Lovely all the same. Well folks, I couldn't think of anywhere more fitting to sign off from this fantastic adventure on the Royalty Fishery than the bridge just outside the Rod Room, aka the Royalty Museum. What a fascinating visit that was earlier on, and it's really helped bring to life the history, deep history of this famous fishery. Would I have liked to have caught one of the big fish that the Hampshire Avon's known for? Barbel, chub, sea trout? Of course I would. But for whatever reason, they just weren't on the munch for me over the last few days. But that has not spoilt my enjoyment one bit. It really has been another mini angling adventure. I've met some fantastic characters and caught loads of fish, tons of bites, and I've sat, stood and waded in some beautiful spots. Sometimes the fishery is more important than the fish, and perhaps this is one such time. As always, huge thanks for all your support. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Probably a long one, but full of interesting stuff, I'm sure. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you again soon on the bank.